Hey, you. Welcome back to Secrets with Maeve, the space for the conversations we usually keep to ourselves. I'm Maeve. Today, we're talking about something I know so many of us struggle with in silence: the unexpected glow up, why men over 60 are more irresistible than ever. Let's get into it. You think turning 60 means you've lost your edge? What if I told you this is the exact age women start seeing you as dangerous in the most irresistible way? Listen to me carefully. Most men spend their youth chasing validation. They chase abs, status, attention, approval. They compete, they posture, they perform, and by the time they hit 60, they believe the game is over. It's not over. It has just changed, and almost no man understands how. Here's the truth. Women rarely say out loud. A man over 60 who understands his power is more magnetic than a 30-year-old trying to prove himself. Not because of money, not because of muscles, not because of manipulation, because of emotional gravity. When a man has lived long enough to lose, to win, to rebuild, to fail publicly, to love deeply, to recover quietly, he carries something younger men can't fake: presence. And women feel presence before they ever analyze it. A younger man walks into a room asking silently, "Do you see me?" A powerful man over 60 walks in thinking, "I see you." That shift changes everything. Most men waste their 60s trying to hold on to 35. They dye the hair, they exaggerate their stories, they try to sound trendy, they laugh too loud at jokes that aren't funny. They seek approval from women half their age like it's oxygen. And that desperation, it kills attraction instantly. Women are not attracted to youth alone. They are attracted to certainty, and certainty is earned through time. When you stop competing with younger men, something powerful happens. You become incomparable. You are no longer in the race. You are the standard. Do you know what unsettles a woman in the best way? A man who is calm when she tests him, a man who doesn't rush to text back, a man who doesn't panic when she pulls away slightly, a man who isn't impressed just because she's beautiful. At 60, you've seen beauty before, you've seen charm before, you've seen drama before. So when you meet a woman and you're not dazzled, you're discerning that energy hits differently. You don't chase, you choose. And women can feel the difference between being chased and being chosen. Here's what most men are wasting: their emotional stability. By 60, you should not be reactive. You should not argue to win. You should not need the last word. When a woman throws a small test your way, sarcasm, silence, mood shifts, you don't react, you observe, you smile, you stay centered. That grounded energy feels safe and thrilling at the same time. Because deep down, women crave two things: emotional safety and masculine direction. And a man who has lived 6 decades has the blueprint for both. If he stops doubting himself, your wrinkles are not weakness. They are evidence. Your slower pace is not decline. It is control. Your silence is not awkward. It is power. But only if you own it. The moment you start apologizing for your age, you shrink. The moment you stand in it without explanation, you expand. And expansion is magnetic. You don't need to be louder. You don't need to be richer. You don't need to be younger. You need to be settled inside yourself. Because when a woman meets a man over 60 who is completely at peace with who he is, who he's been, and who he's becoming, she feels something rare: stability without boredom, experience without arrogance, confidence without noise. That combination, almost no man masters it, and that's why almost no man uses it, but you can. Let me tell you something. Most men will never hear from a woman directly. When a man over 60 stops trying to impress and starts observing instead, he becomes intensely attractive because attention is power. You see, younger men try to fill silence. They overshare, they explain, they try to prove their value in the first 10 minutes. It feels like an audition, but a seasoned man, he listens. And not the weak nodding, approval seeking kind of listening. I mean, slow, steady, intentional listening. The kind where you look at her and she feels studied, not judged, not evaluated, studied. When you listen without rushing to respond, you create tension. And tension, when it's calm and controlled, is magnetic. Women are used to being looked at. They are not used to being understood. At 60, you've had enough conversations to recognize patterns. You can hear insecurity hiding behind confidence. You can spot loneliness behind sarcasm. You can sense authenticity versus performance. If you use that awareness wisely, you become rare. Most men waste this stage of life by talking about their past like it's a trophy shelf. Back in my day, when I was younger, I used to. That energy feels like nostalgia mixed with regret. Instead, the irresistible man speaks about the present with curiosity and the future with calm excitement. He doesn't cling to youth. He transcends it. There's something incredibly attractive about a man who is not trying to relive his peak because he understands his peak is internal. Now, and here's where it gets deeper. Women test older men differently than younger men. With younger men, they test dominance. With older men, they test emotional steadiness. She might tease you about your age. She might compare you to younger men playfully. She might question your energy levels or modern awareness. She's not insulting you. She's measuring your frame. If you react defensively, joke aggressively, or try to outdo younger men, you lose instantly. But if you smile slowly and say, experience teaches you what youth can't, and leave it there. Now she's intrigued because you didn't compete. You positioned. Another secret most men are wasting at this age: scarcity. By 60, your circle should be smaller. Your time should be more valuable. Your attention should not be easily accessible. If you are available at every moment, responding instantly, rearranging your schedule for someone who hasn't earned it, you signal neediness. But when you have your routines, your hobbies, your priorities, when your life feels full without her, she feels invited, not needed. And being invited into a stable man's world feels far more seductive than being the center of an unstable one. Understand this. Mystery does not come from being secretive. It comes from being complete. When you don't overshare your struggles immediately, when you don't trauma dump about your divorce, when you don't list your accomplishments to justify your worth, you allow discovery. And discovery creates attraction. Here's something powerful. A man over 60 who is comfortable with silence becomes unforgettable. If she pauses in conversation and you don't rush to fill it. If she looks at you and you hold eye contact calmly. If she says something slightly provocative and you respond with a subtle smile instead of a defensive explanation, you create emotional depth. And depth is intoxicating. Most men at this age fear irrelevance, so they overcompensate. They try too hard to prove they're still sharp, still strong, still desirable. But true magnetism at this stage comes from restraint. Speak less, observe more, react slower, and most importantly, mean what you say. When your words are measured, your compliments become powerful. When you say, I enjoy your company, instead of showering her with exaggerated praise, she feels the weight of it, because you are not a man who says things lightly. And when a woman realizes your attention is selective, she begins to value it. That's when attraction shifts from surface level to psychological. And psychological attraction, that's the kind that lingers long after you leave the room. Now, let me tell you the part that almost no man over 60 truly understands. Your biggest advantage isn't your experience, it's your emotional restraint. Most men think attraction is built through doing more. More talking, more texting, more proving, more explaining. But at this stage of life, attraction grows when you do less with intention. A man who has mastered himself is far more seductive than a man who is still trying to master the world. By 60, you've felt heartbreak. You've faced rejection. You've survived disappointment. You've watched people leave. You've rebuilt from loss. If you've done the inner work, that history doesn't make you bitter. It makes you steady, and steady is rare. When a woman senses that you are not easily shaken, she relaxes. Not because you're passive, but because you're grounded. Most men are still reactive at 60. They argue over small things. They get offended quickly. They need to correct every misunderstanding. They raise their voices to assert control. That energy feels fragile. But when you let small things slide, when you choose your battles, when you stay composed, even when she's emotional, you communicate something powerful. I don't lose control, and that's deeply attractive. Understand this clearly. Women don't fall for perfection. They fall for emotional safety mixed with quiet dominance. If she disagrees with you and you listen without interrupting, then calmly state your position without aggression. She feels respected. If she challenges you and you don't crumble or explode, she feels your strength. If she pulls back slightly and you don't chase desperately, she feels your independence. That independence is intoxicating because a man who does not cling cannot be controlled, and control dynamics are always present in attraction, even subtly. Now, here's the mistake most men over 60 are making. They seek companionship out of fear of loneliness instead of desire. There's a difference. When you pursue a woman because you're afraid of being alone, she feels the pressure. It's heavy, it's needy. But when you pursue because you enjoy her presence, not because you need it, she feels chosen. And being chosen by a man who doesn't need validation anymore, that hits differently. Another thing women can't resist in a man over 60, emotional clarity. At this age, confusion is unattractive. If you want to see her, say it clearly. If you're not interested, say it respectfully. If something bothers you, address it calmly. You don't play guessing games. You don't disappear to create fake mystery. You don't manipulate to feel powerful. That behavior belongs to insecure men still figuring themselves out. You, on the other hand, have lived long enough to value simplicity. Clarity feels masculine, and masculinity, when calm and controlled, feels grounding to a woman. There's also something else happening at this age that you may not realize. You are no longer competing on speed. You're competing on depth. You don't need rapid fire flirting. You don't need flashy charisma. You don't need to dominate every room. When you speak slowly and deliberately, when you maintain steady eye contact, when you respond instead of react, you create an emotional pace that feels different from the chaotic energy of younger men. And that difference is attractive because many women are exhausted by unpredictability. They've dealt with emotional roller coasters. They've dealt with inconsistency. They've dealt with men who promise intensity but deliver instability. When you show up consistent, calm, decisive, you stand out not loudly but unmistakably. Here's the secret most men are wasting: your patience. At 60, you don't need immediate gratification. You understand timing. You understand pacing. You understand that tension builds when things unfold naturally. If you rush physical intimacy, you signal insecurity. If you rush emotional bonding, you signal desperation. But when you let attraction breathe, when you allow her to lean in first, sometimes when you don't force momentum, you create space for her to invest. And people value what they invest in. You don't chase sparks, you build slow burning fire. And slow burning fire lasts longer. The man who cannot sit comfortably in silence with himself will always struggle with attraction. But the man who is fully at peace alone, he becomes magnetic without trying because he's not seeking to be completed. He's offering partnership from completeness. And that energy, quiet, grounded, emotionally restrained, is something most men never develop. But the ones who do, they become unforgettable. Here's where it gets even more powerful. At 60, you don't win through intensity. You win through standards. Most men think attraction is about being impressive. But the older you get, the more attraction becomes about what you tolerate and what you refuse to tolerate. Women can't resist a man over 60 who has boundaries he enforces calmly. Notice I didn't say aggressively, not loudly, not dramatically, calmly. If she cancels last minute without respect and you respond with, "No problem, let me know when you're certain," and then you genuinely pull back your availability, you communicate value. You're not punishing. You're not arguing. You're not begging for reassurance. You're adjusting access, and access is everything. Most men waste their 60s becoming overly accommodating. They think being agreeable makes them lovable, so they say yes when they mean no. They ignore red flags because they fear starting over. They tolerate disrespect because they don't want to lose companionship. But here's the truth. Desperation smells louder at 60 than at 25, because at 25, insecurity is expected. At 60, it feels unresolved. When you tolerate behavior that doesn't align with your standards, you silently communicate that you don't believe you can do better. And women sense that instantly. But when you walk away from inconsistency without drama, when you maintain warmth but withdraw investment, when you show that your peace matters more than temporary validation, you become rare. A man with nothing to prove but everything to protect. That's magnetic. Now let's talk about something most men avoid at this age. Physical presence, not gym obsession, not chasing youth, not pretending you're 35, but caring. When you dress intentionally, even simply but sharply, you signal self-respect. When you stand upright, move deliberately, and maintain steady eye contact, you radiate authority without saying a word. You don't need designer labels. You need alignment between how you feel about yourself and how you present yourself. A man over 60 who carries himself like he respects his body, even if it's imperfect, feels grounded. And grounded men feel safe. Safety is deeply attractive. But here's the paradox. Safety without edge becomes boring. So what's the edge? It's unpredictability in mindset, not behavior. You have stories she hasn't lived. You have perspectives she hasn't heard. You've seen eras change. You've adapted. You've survived. If you share insights instead of lectures, curiosity instead of criticism, humor instead of cynicism, you become captivating. Most men at this stage fall into bitterness. They complain about modern dating. They criticize younger generations. They talk about how things used to be better. That energy feels heavy. But when you say times change, it's interesting to watch how people adapt. Instead of attacking the present, you feel evolved. Evolution is attractive. Bitterness is not. Another secret women can't resist in men over 60. Emotional generosity without emotional dependency. You can compliment her deeply without needing one back. You can express desire without pressuring. You can care without clinging. That balance is rare because caring is powerful, but only when it's offered from strength, not fear. Let me tell you something quietly important. At this stage, many women are not looking for chaos. They've experienced it. They've survived it. They've matured past it. When they meet a man who is emotionally intelligent, stable, humorous, physically present, and standards-driven, they relax into femininity, not because he controls them, but because he controls himself. Self-control is the ultimate form of dominance. And dominance, when it's calm and ethical, feels safe. You don't raise your voice. You don't chase approval. You don't overextend. You decide, and decisions create direction. Most men waste their later years trying to feel desired again. But the man who shifts from, "Do you want me to does this? Align with my life," transforms everything. Because when you evaluate instead of audition, when you assess instead of impress, when you maintain standards without apology, you stop being an option. You become the opportunity. And women feel that difference instantly. Now, I'm going to tell you the truth that changes everything. The most irresistible thing about a man over 60 is not his money, not his experience, not even his confidence. It's his peace. Real peace. Not the forced calm, not the I don't care act, not emotional shutdown. I'm talking about the kind of peace that comes from accepting your past, owning your mistakes, forgiving yourself, and no longer trying to prove your worth to anyone. When a woman meets a man who is no longer at war with himself, she feels it immediately. Most men, even in their 60s, are still fighting invisible battles, regret over lost opportunities, bitterness from divorce, anger about betrayal, fear of aging, fear of becoming irrelevant. And those unresolved emotions leak out through sarcasm, through jealousy, through overreactions, through subtle insecurity. But the man who has faced those shadows and made peace with them, he feels different. He laughs easier. He listens deeper. He reacts slower. He chooses carefully. And that kind of energy is grounding. You don't try to dominate conversations. You don't compete with younger men. You don't seek constant reassurance because you already know who you are. That certainty is seductive. Here's something powerful. Women are drawn to men who make them feel emotionally safe without feeling emotionally trapped. If you allow her freedom socially, mentally, emotionally, without hovering or policing, she feels trusted. And when someone feels trusted, they relax. Trust is magnetic. Control repels. Most men waste their later years trying to secure loyalty through pressure, checking phones, questioning male friends, overanalyzing delays in response, subtle interrogations disguised as curiosity. That energy screams insecurity. But when you operate from abundance, not arrogance, but abundance, you don't cling. If she chooses you, she chooses you. If she doesn't, you remain steady. That calm detachment isn't coldness, it's self-respect. And self-respect radiates. Let's go deeper. At 60, intimacy becomes less about performance and more about presence. If you are attentive, if you are patient, if you are emotionally tuned in, you become unforgettable. You don't rush moments. You don't treat connection like a checklist. You don't reduce attraction to physical validation. You create depth. And depth creates bonds. Most men are wasting this stage of life trying to relive ego-driven desire instead of building soul-level connection. But when you slow down and truly see her, when you speak with intention, when you touch with awareness, when you lead with calm certainty, you separate yourself from 90% of men instantly, because most men, regardless of age, are still trying to be wanted. But the man who is already whole, he doesn't need to be wanted. He invites partnership, and invitation feels powerful. So here's the question you need to sit with tonight. Are you living your 60s trying to reclaim your youth? Or are you stepping fully into the man you've earned the right to become? Because the moment you stop apologizing for your age, the moment you stop chasing validation, the moment you protect your peace more than your pride, you become dangerous in the most attractive way. Now, I want you to be honest in the comments. What is one trait you know you've mastered with age and one trait you know you still need to strengthen? Write it below if this opened your eyes. Like the video. Subscribe if you're ready to level up instead of fade out, and share this with a man who needs to hear that his best years aren't behind him. They're finally aligned with who he truly is.